Hey, everybody, my name is Nathan Warnock, and I will be joined shortly by my wife, Andrea. We make up the Marriage by Design podcast team. This is a show that we get an opportunity to do every Sunday night, and basically the purpose of it is to tackle a topic that we've kind of been thinking about during the week. You know, we do shows on Mondays and Thursdays. Mondays is focused more on marriage, and Thursdays is focused more on family life. And the whole purpose of the podcast is, how do we do marriage? How do we do family the way that God designed it and revealed it to us in His Word? Whereas Sunday is more conversational. So, we might talk about a topic that has just sort of struck us this week as we think about marriage and family in, the modern age in the United States. And then we talk your questions. So if you pop on and you're watching this live with us, feel free to put any questions that you have in the comments down below. We'll address those directly as we go through this Sunday Night Live event. And we also collect questions over the course of the week, and we address those on this event as well. So not a super long event, maybe 20, 25 minutes at the most. But we're going to talk this week about something that I've been thinking about, and that is the influences that we allow around our family. So we know, and you've probably heard, if you grew up in one of those families that tells you, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. And so we grow up knowing that the influences around us matter. But it's been interesting as I've been thinking this week about the influences that we allow around our family. There she is.
Sorry, long division questions.
Oh, boy. This is my wife, the aforementioned. Lovely.
What hair don't care?
Night. Is that a thing? Is that like a saying?
Yeah, it's like messy hair don't care.
Love it. That's good.
My hair didn't get dried because somebody had a question.
That's right. No worries. So, as I was saying, I was thinking about this because I was thinking how interesting it is that you can take even Christians from different parts of the United States, and they might have really different opinions about the same thing, right? And so it had me thinking about the influences that we allow around specifically our children. And so I wanted to share something with those of you who are joining us live, or those of you who watch this when it gets posted up. By the way, these always get posted up on YouTube. The video on demand gets posted up right as soon as we finish our live event. I post the audio only. We have a pretty significant audio only folks that listen to us on iTunes or Google Podcast or whatever the case may be. That gets posted up on Wednesday each week so that you can listen to it. But as I was thinking about that, there's two things that I wanted to talk about tonight, and it's a little philosophical, so stick with me for a minute. I promise you there's a payoff at the end of this, but it's the difference between morals and mores, because a lot of people think these things are the same, and I hear these terms are mixed up a lot when people talk about it. So they talk about things like, well, what are the morals of the United States, right? Well, morals are principles that have been given by somebody greater than us, right? So in order to have moral law, there has to be a moral law giver. So the classic case of this is if you look at the United States Constitution, there's a clear nod to a moral law giver, right? These things, these rights we find self-evident, given by God: life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, right? Those are morals. In order to have morals, you have to have a moral lawgiver. Well, of course, here's the problem, is in the United States, we're at a place right now where we want to deny that there is anything greater than us as humans, right? If there's one thing that's super important in the United States right now, it's personal autonomy. The problem with personal autonomy is personal autonomy says the most important thing is what I think, right? For myself, it's how I handle myself. It's what I think about this issue or that issue. That's the most important thing. Well, in order to have that, by definition, you have to not have a moral lawgiver, right? Because that moral lawgiver implies there's somebody greater than you that you have a responsibility to.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about sort of the cultural norms in the United States, what we're really talking about is mores, right? Mores change. Mores are society's sort of ebb and flow in the things that we believe are right or wrong. That's mores. Well, why does that matter? Well, it matters because
Sounds like you just said that's s'mores.
that's s'mores, which are delicious. So why does that matter? Because they're delicious.
Yeah.
No, so why does it matter? Well, it matters because we need to have an honest conversation as parents about what are the things that we want our children to believe. Because here's the reality of the matter. There are mores in the United States of America, meaning there are belief systems that are in vogue in the United States that are popular, that are believed by a majority of people. And I will be the first to say this depends a little bit on where you live.
Sure.
Right? So the mores of Tuscaloosa, Alabama might be different than the mores of Brooklyn, New York, right? And of course we could go and do this all day, right? And the point is those mores change. Well, the reason why this matters is because as parents, we need to recognize that our children have influences around them. And those influences by default will line up with whatever the mores of the society that we live in are. So, a lot of us, we don't necessarily, we might be serious about, okay, we're going to be involved in our church, we're going to be involved in youth group, we're going to have a group of friends that are around our family that influence our family, and those are good things because those groups believe as we believe. Well, but what about all the other times that your children are awake, right? I mean, if they're in, let's just be honest, if they're in a public school system setting, well, what are the mores of those teachers, right, that are being passed down? Because the reality of the matter is our kids sleep, knock on wood, for 11 hours a day, right? And then they wake up and then they have about, what does that leave left? 13 hours of the day where they're being influenced by someone. And my point in this whole thing is for us to be intentional as parents to think about who is influencing our kids. Because you might think, oh, well, these are good people. And probably they are good people around your kids. The question is, are they teaching them the morals that we as Christians want our children to learn? Or are they teaching them the mores of the society around them? And, where I was really finding this fascinating is a study that came out last week that was lamenting how many quote unquote Christian raised children were leaving the faith when they get into upper high school and college. And one of the things that this study pointed out was that the issue is we have our kids being influenced by people who believe in the morals as given to us by God and his word, right? Who are around our kids, say 3 hours on Wednesdays, say 2 or 3 hours on Sundays, and then whatever we're teaching them at home, right? They're around outside influences other than that, potentially 8+ hours a day. And so it was saying, we need to be honest about, are the things that they're being taught detrimental to them with regards to what we're trying to teach them as parents? And if so, what sacrifices are we willing to make as parents to sort of cut out those negative influences? What do you think about that?
I don't know. I haven't really. I mean, I don't know.
It's a difficult thing to think about because here's really the problem with that is a lot of those influences that are in their lives a lot of times of the day it would be really sacrificial to cut some of those things out. Right. I mean, that's the difficult part. But I think it's worth us thinking about as parents.
Yeah, and I feel like there's a balance between completely shutting off your kid to the world in protecting them and allowing them to, have experience in the world too.
Right. Yeah, I think the difficult thing is what balance does that follow, right? I mean, it's different probably with a 4-year-old versus a 14-year-old,
Sure.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure it varies depending on the child, of course, too.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, it's difficult. The point is, what this article was pointing out is that a lot of Christian parents they're not, you're not even really proactively thinking about this, right? We're just thinking that, okay, if we're involved in a church, we're involved in a small group, our kids are involved in youth group, that's going to be enough to reinforce, the things that we want our kids to believe. And what this article was saying is statistically that's not supported, which means, we need to be spending more time as parents thinking about that, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, interesting. So anyway, take with that what you will. Here is, I think, the thing that I would say, and I think Andrea would agree with me on this. We talk about this all the time on this channel. If there's one thing that's more important than anything else, it's parenting intentionally. And I think that was why I wanted to talk about this a little bit tonight. This is one of those areas where I think we just go, oh, well, this is what you do, right? You have kids and you raise them, and then they go off to school, and they go to school, and then they have these friends from school, and we do sleepovers, and they have birthday parties, and they play these sports with these other kids, and that's what you do here. And I think it's just important for us to think about that as parents. Is that right or not? No answer necessarily right or wrong. Just is it?
Yeah, that's something we talk about a lot. Is not just parenting intentionally, but everything intentionally.
Right.
Intentionality in all things.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's right. That's right. So there you have it. Hopefully that sparks some conversation with you and your spouse if you have kids. If you don't, maybe some conversation about when you do, which is a good transition into the next thing we have to talk about, which is a question, and I'm going to pose it to you so that you can respond to the folks.
Okay.
But the question that has been raised is, how do I know when I'm ready to have children? Or how, my spouse and I, how do we know when we're ready to have children? Because it seems like, and it is, a big responsibility. So as a couple, how do we know when we're ready to have children? And then I will kind of ask you a back end follow-up to that, which is, how do we know when to stop having children? If that's the right way to ask it? How do we know if we should have more children?
So this is a loaded question.
It is.
How do you know when you should start having children? Well, if you're married, then you should know that you're
okay. So, all right. So that's a good place to start. So if you're not married, how do you know when you should start having children?
When you're married.
Right. That's right. Have him tell the bum to marry you, and then you can start talking about children.
Oh man. So I'm gonna give an answer that's probably not surprising to anybody, but you're never ready to have children. Once you, just like probably most people would say, man, I didn't know what marriage was, and I wasn't ready to get married. We hear that a lot, like I didn't know what I was getting into until I got into it and realized I wasn't ready for it.
Sure.
I think having kids is a lot like that too. There's a saying that says, I was a perfect parent before I became a parent.
Yeah.
And that's true. So I think.
Yeah, because it was academic.
Right.
At that point.
Yeah, because all, right? When they're not your kids and you're not raising them, everything. So, yeah. When are you ready to have children? When you're married. So.
Just leaving it at that.
That's a big answer. Or a big question, because I feel like I'm on a fence of struggle with that question a little bit. Nathan and I have chosen not to use birth control for a long time because we feel like that's what God has called us to, and it's become a question of faith for us.
Yeah.
Do we have faith in the Lord with our family size? And my honest answer is no. I'm choosing to trust the Lord because I feel like that's what he's called us to, but that's really hard. As you have, we have 4 kids, and that gets to be a lot, and
Sure.
It could be more. And so, that gets harder the more kids we have.
Yeah.
And I start questioning, like, were we really supposed to have faith with the Lord in our family size? Is that really, just questioning all of that. Is that what the way God intended it to be with everybody's family size? And Nathan said before, the question of how many kids are you going to have is really a 50-year-old question,
Right.
because before, you knew you could track the woman's body and the cycle and all of that and do some natural family planning. We've known for many hundreds of years, maybe thousands, I don't know, about a woman's body and how that works with having kids, but it's not foolproof.
Right.
And I think God gave us cycles and rhythms to be able to track some of those things and try to naturally family plan. So there's that, but we've felt convicted that birth control is not for us. And so that's why I say, when you're married, you're ready to have kids, because it really comes down to a faith issue for us. Are you going to trust the Lord with your family size? And are you going to trust the Lord with when you first have a child? And if you feel like you're not ready to be a parent, maybe you aren't ready to get married either.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a fair question to ask. And the other thing I would say is, what you said, but I want to put a point on it. You're never gonna feel like, okay, now I'm prepared to raise another human being from birth for the rest of their life.
I don't feel like I'm ready to be a parent.
That's right.
I'm kind of talking in circles, because it's a crisis of faith for me, not faith in like what I believe at the core of my being, but a crisis of faith in this one area for me. And what do I believe God meant for us, as Christians from the beginning with all that. And,
right.
And so, yeah.
Right.
I don't know, but I think, being married, when you're married, you realize, man, there's a lot of work I need on myself. There's a lot. I feel like when you're married, there's so much in your face about the work that God needs to do in your heart, because it comes out so much, and it's so obvious, and your flaws and all that sort of thing. So parenting is that times 25. And if you really soften your heart to the Lord when you're first married and allow God to do that work, then you'll be ready for parenting too, because it's a constant work on your heart,
right,
and on your faith, and on your patience, and
right.
That's, I think, the biggest way to quote know when you're ready to be a parent is when you are heeding to the Lord.
Yeah. I would add on to that, and I'd love your thoughts. Maybe you think I'm off base on this, but I would say a couple of times when you're probably not ready to have a child. One of them is, you should not have a child if the main purpose, if you're being honest with yourself, is because you're lonely and you want a companion.
Sure.
That's probably not a good time to have a child.
True.
And I say that because if
you're looking for a child to fill some hole or void inside of you,
right?
Yikes. Don't do that.
Yeah. And
parenting is a constant outpouring. Not very rarely are you poured into.
Right. But even when you are, it's really damaging to the child.
Mm.
And you and I have come across a string of young women that we've had an opportunity to mentor, and it's particularly women in this case, whose mothers really look at them as a friend.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been really damaging for those young women, because even when they were young women, they not only had the responsibility of being a daughter and all that that entails, but really an unfair additional responsibility of serving a friend role to their mothers that they were not designed to fill at that age.
Right.
Hopefully your kids transition into that as they're older, but that's not the role they're designed to fill when they're young.
Right. And mother-daughter relationships, or mother-child relationships, as that child gets older and maybe that friendship can blossom.
Yeah.
There's still boundaries around that, you
That's
know.
right.
Like I might talk to some of my really close friends about, I'm having this issue with my husband, you know, I need some wisdom or advice. Never should you go to your child about that.
That's fair.
You know, so a friendship with boundaries.
Yeah. Or your mother, really. I mean, that's a hard position to put your husband in, to go to your mom with those issues you're having in your marriage as well. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So here's the other time I would say you probably shouldn't have a child. And that is if your marriage is in a bad place and you think having a child is going to fix it.
Yeah.
Because it won't. And on top of that, it'll probably make it worse. And it for sure will make it a million times more complicated as far as, you know, if there ends up being a dissolution of the marriage or that type of stuff. So, you know, to use a child to try and hold things together is a really an atrocious thing to do to the child, frankly, and isn't going to fix it. So that would be my 2 cents worth.
Good.
All right.
A tough question for me.
It was, babe. We don't take easy questions here on Marriage by Design.
Yes, we do.
All right. What do you got? An easy one for me then?
You said your follow-up question was how do you know when you're done?
Yes. Sorry, I didn't know if your answer to that involved the contraception discussion or what.
Yeah, I think, but there is a piece to that though. I mean, even with starting a family and feeling like you're being done, we feel like natural family planning is something that is okay. Like we have freedom with that. So I don't know when you're done. Sometimes you just know, and sometimes you don't, and sometimes you think you are and you're not. And I don't know. A lot of people say like they just knew. I don't know. How do you feel like you know when you're done?
Just stop having babies. I don't know. That's a hard thing, isn't it? I mean, we're gonna do it will be a pretty transparent episode or two here later this fall or later this winter about contraception in general. And
it'll be mostly me just babbling because I'm struggling with all of that.
Excuse me. I mean, it's something to think about, obviously, as a couple and to take before the Lord. And I think that's the biggest thing to take away is my thing on contraception isn't necessarily a dogmatic, meaning like a thus saith the Lord one way or the other. The thing that I think we at least need to take stock of and realize is what Andrea said, which is that whole idea of essentially as a couple telling God, hey, God, we're going to have 3 kids and then we're going to be done. If you go before 1960, people would look at you like you have an eye growing in the middle of your head. Right? They'd be like, what do you mean you're going to have 3 children? So after you have 3 kids, you're going to stop having sex then? Well, no. Well, but then you might have more kids. Well, no, we're going to prevent that from happening. And they would look at you like, what are you talking about? The proliferation of contraception really took off at that time to where just anybody could use it. And so, we at least have to be honest about that. I'm not saying, look, don't please send me the links to how the Egyptians spread, sheep fat over their penises to prevent having big. I don't care about all that. Right. I understand.
Skin.
I understand people have tried to do contraception, but I'm talking about effective, reliable contraception. Right. So anyway, that's, I think, the main point is, now we're in 2021. As couples, contraception has been available, reliable, et cetera, long enough that even within Christian communities, there's not even any question about it. Right? You don't even talk about it.
Right.
It goes back to what we talked about in the first half of this episode, which is intentionality.
Right.
And these things that we just as couples go, well, yeah, obviously we'll use birth control. Well, right, but can we talk about that for a second? And I think that's where you and I kind of started talking about it and went, whoa. Like maybe our hearts aren't right about this. So anyway, I look forward to having that conversation and would love to hear, as you guys watch this or listen to this, I would love to have your comments specifically with the contraception issue. We have some couples that spent quite a bit of time talking and praying about it as a couple and came down on exactly the opposite side of the issue that we did. And that's great. So would love to hear your thoughts and comments on that as well.
Okay, so the question for you.
Yes.
Is a guy who's married, and his wife has a really good friend that's a guy friend, and they get together, just the two of them. At times, like to hang out and talk and whatever, and the husband is telling his wife, I'm not comfortable with that. I don't think that's right. If you guys want to get together, in groups, that's great. Or, all the three of us or whatever that is. But, being that you're married and you're my wife, I just don't think that's right for you to get together with another guy.
Yep.
Just one-on-one. And I don't even know if it's like a one-on-one, like she's going over to his place, but maybe having lunch together and.
Sure.
They're very good friends. So they share a lot together. And then the wife is not, so now the wife is really upset about that and is saying her husband is controlling and insecure.
Sure.
And so what would be your thoughts on that and your advice? And
well, first of all, I would say to someone in that, my very first question would be, have you sat down with your wife and had a transparent conversation? Not just, hey, she gets back from hanging out with this guy friend and you fly off the handle, right? Have you, sat down at a date night or something like that and just laid out, hey, this is how this makes me feel. This is why I think it's wrong, right? I always want to start with that because so much of these things get mistranslated, right? And so that would always be my first question. After that, certainly we could talk about the appearances, right? And this is something that I think a lot of even Christians want to fall on this, like, well, God doesn't want us to be worried about what other people think. Well, that's not true. When we look biblically, the appearances do matter to the Lord. Paul, and this was contextual, right? I understand that. But Paul got down to whether men should wear long hair and women should wear long hair in the church, right? It doesn't get any more appearance related than that. And really, that actual example is insightful here because the reason why Paul wanted men wearing short hair in church had nothing to do with men shouldn't look like women and everything to do with pagans at the time wore long hair as a way of worshiping their gods. So the issue wasn't long hair, short hair. It was, are you trying to look like
the world,
or are you standing out? And I think that's insightful here. Look, the world clearly would say, look, you have lunch with whoever you want, you hang out with whoever you want, and if your spouse doesn't understand it, then they just don't get it, and they're probably controlling or are insecure. And you know what? Might be the case. But there's a reality that even if you're meeting out, if you're out to lunch with someone that's not your spouse, and you're having, and by implication,
somebody
and what you're
of the
telling
opposite
me,
sex.
if somebody of the opposite sex, and you're having intimate conversation, and remember, intimate doesn't mean you're making out, right? I'm not talking about sex necessarily. I'm talking about, look, we've all seen
Deep
couples that are out to lunch or dinner, and they're having an intimate conversation, right? They're leaned close together, they're staring in each other's eyes and having a conversation, and the conversation gives the impression of exclusivity, right? There's something that this couple has that you don't get to have as the person watching the conversation. We need to be really careful about giving off those exclusivity vibes with anybody but our spouse. Well, why? Well, because you're holding yourself out as a Christian couple. So one of the principles of Christian marriage is exclusivity, right? Because our marriages are designed to be a picture of God's relationship with us. God is our only God. There's an exclusive relationship there. And if we believe in the Lord Jesus Christ, we're covered in his blood. There's an exclusivity to that relationship too. So there's an exclusivity to that. And we need to be careful about what other people around are seeing, because they're going to interpret our relationship with the Lord in that light, right? We can talk about temptation, right? It would be easy for me to sit here and go, well, right, but when I had an affair, it didn't start with me waking up one day and going, man, I think I'll just jump in the sack with someone else, right? It started with a whole bunch of compromises. Yeah. But here's the thing, here's the reality I want to get to. Here's the punchline, right? You don't even need to go down any of those roads. Because if you read Ephesians, it's very clear that our relationship to our spouse is one of sacrifice. Which means if your spouse has come to you and said, this relationship is a stumbling block for me, it raises up feelings of jealousy. Let's assume they have the lowest security of any human being ever, and let's assume they're the most controlling human being ever. Your role as their spouse is still to respect them and what they ask with regards to this situation. And what they've asked is, please don't do that.
Yeah, and it's not even, in this particular situation, in my opinion, he's not even saying like, you need to never talk to this person again or not, whatever. Right. He's just saying, be in groups together, or the three of us can go together. Right. I'm happy for you to have this friendship, right? But it shouldn't be like a deep friendship, and it needs to be not just the two of you.
That's right. Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And so I would say step one is look your husband in this example, or wife, if it's your wife that's struggling with this, look them in the eye and say, I don't necessarily agree with this and I don't understand it, but I love you and I want to respect you. And so I will do this for you. And then if they're going down the road of, and also don't ever talk to them again, then maybe it's time to get a mentor couple in your life involved to talk about that. Right. To sit there, because maybe you're going to sit down and, your spouse is going to say, I'm just sure that they're having an affair. Right. Well, that's something that needs to be dealt with in a larger scheme than just that one encounter. Right. So sitting down with a couple that you trust to talk through this in more detail, if you feel like your spouse is really being across the line in this, we highly recommend that, because I don't want you to stuff that and let the resentment build up inside of you and then start splashing out over all the people around you, right? So love your spouse, respect your spouse and what they're asking you to do sacrificially, right? Even if it's sacrificially, especially if it's sacrificially. And if you need to get another couple involved to talk about it further, please do that.
Yep.
Makes sense?
Yep.
All right, guys, keep those questions coming.
Yeah.
If you have questions, if you've watched this after the fact, if you watch it on the video on demand on our YouTube page, that's the Marriage by Design podcast on YouTube, you can just comment to this video with any questions that you have, or any of our other videos. We have a video that comes out about marriage every Monday, and one that comes out every Thursday about family. So if you have any questions, feel free to comment on any of those. We get notified, and we will discuss those questions, either comment back to you or discuss them on Sunday nights. If you're listening to this on any of our podcast partners, please go over to Facebook and search Marriage by Design Podcast. That's our page. It'll pop up. Just hop on that page and shoot us a message with the question. You can certainly just post it up, and we'll be notified of that. If you want some anonymity, and it's not a question that you feel comfortable leaving in a public forum like
slip
Facebook,
in our DMs.
Then slip it in our DMs, or you can email us.
I'm so hippin' with
that
it.
You are, babe. I love when. I was going to make a slip in DMs joke.
Please
It's
don't.
probably inappropriate. Or you can email us. That's marriagebydesignpodcast@gmail.com, or slip it in our DMs.
Too far.
But we love your questions. So please, 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 no stupid questions. Please don't hesitate to throw them in there. Guys?
Was that saying don't ask any stupid questions? Or
No, there is no stupid questions. No stupid questions.
Allowed.
Okay. No, please bring the stupid questions. We will not tell you they're stupid. Probably. All right, guys. That's all the time we got for tonight. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Really appreciate you being here. Until next time, guys, remember, God is for your family. Have a good night.